So hello everybody, my name is Matthew Hicks. I currently work at CodeStack, and today we're going to be talking about responsive web designing with Bootstrap. At CodeStack we use a lot of Bootstrap, so it's one of the things that I'm pretty familiar with, but at the same time it's also going to help you in your everyday projects that you do, just to make it easier for you to program and also for you to design your projects. So before I get started, I do want to mention that our CodeStack Academy, the registration is now open. Start date is September 1st. And in this academy, we do cover Bootstrap as one of the topics. And most of the things that you will see here are also covered in the academy, but at a greater depth. And you also have access to designers notice. If you want to know more information or to register, go to codestackacademy.org. And I have been told that it's filling up quick, so if you want to get into that, you better start now. All right, so for this lesson, what you're going to need is Visual Studio Code. If you don't already have it installed, you can go to code.visualstudio.com and download it there. It's pretty light, so it shouldn't take too long. And then we will also need a VS Code extension called Live Server. I wrote with Dale. Hang on, where'd my screen go? Oh. All right, sorry, folks. All right, and I'll talk about how to install that extension later. So first things first, what exactly is Bootstrap? Well, Bootstrap is a CSS framework that also includes some JavaScript. Generally, when I mean CSS framework, what I mean by that is basically a bunch of CSS files or classes that have been written by someone else, and makes it easier for you to use, so you don't have to go in and write your own custom classes. Bootstrap uses a grid system that we'll talk about it later. Bootstrap also has some basic components that are built into it, for instance, like buttons and forms and tables that you can use from their site, and we'll go over that in a little bit and talk about exactly how to do that. Bootstrap is a responsive design. It is a mobile-first design, meaning that we design from a mobile phone to a desktop. And the reason behind that is, if you think about it, there's tons of people that use mobile phones for everything, and the chances of them landing on your website with a mobile device is a lot greater than on a website these days, or on a desktop these days. So being that Bootstrap is responsive and that they design from mobile first, we really enjoy that because, like I just said, everybody goes on a mobile device. The latest versions of Bootstrap have also started to include icons in them. They are planning on expanding this. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. For this lesson, we won't be touching the icons, but just know that it is a possibility that you can use them. So the history of Bootstrap. Bootstrap originally started in Twitter, and it was called Twitter Blueprint. It was built by a bunch of people who worked at Twitter, and the main reason that they built it was to create consistency across their inner platforms and tools. In 2011, it was renamed Bootstrap and was released to the public as an open source project. Since then, Bootstrap has gone through 4 major updates, with Bootstrap 4.5 being the latest, and this was launched in 2018. During these updates, Bootstrap became a mobile-first approach. They didn't start out this way, but I think it was Bootstrap 2 is when they changed their design aspect to mobile-first and then go to the desktop after. It's being used by millions of people currently, and I'll show you some numbers in a little bit. But here's an interesting thing. Last week, Bootstrap 5 in the alpha version was released. There's a couple major updates coming in. One, that they're removing jQuery in place of JavaScript. They're going to update some of their documentation, and they're going to enhance the grid system. So we'll talk a little bit about the grid system later. But as far as the way that it's going to work, nothing's going to change from this lecture. So as I said, millions of people use Bootstrap. In 2018, roughly 18 million websites were using Bootstrap. We at CodeStack use Bootstrap for pretty much all of our sites. The CodeStack Academy website, our CodeStack site, is built off of Bootstrap. The Department of Fish and Wildlife's website is using Bootstrap. I also happen to notice that the National Hockey League and the National Basketball Association are all using Bootstrap. You can actually download a Google extension called Wapalizer, and it scans the website and shows you exactly which sites use UI frameworks and such. So you can actually look on it and say, oh, okay, this site's using Bootstrap. So I just found a couple of these were using them. They're pretty high traffic sites. So Bootstrap definitely is something that you could use for any application. So why use Bootstrap? Well, first, it's free. It's open source. Open source means that it has a lot of access. People can access it. It's easy to use. And like I said before, it's mobile first. But the main reason I like using Bootstrap is because of the support behind it. Because you have so many people that access it, so many people that are using it, you're going to have a lot of people that try different things, have a lot of knowledge behind how to use it. So the support is always going to be there. If you're to go into something that, say, maybe less than 1 million people use, the support and the amount of people that actually use it is going to be less. So you won't have as many answers if you run into trouble or into a roadblock. Because you know, the internet, you can always find pretty much anything. But if you put more people use it, you have a better chance of finding what your problem is. So let's try it out, okay? So first thing I want to say before we actually dive into Bootstrap is I want to talk about the grid system a little bit. If you've ever looked at a piece of grid paper, you know that it has rows and columns. Well, Bootstrap works the same way with its grid system. It uses a rows and columns system. The maximum amount of columns across is 12. And I'll talk about this when we start developing and creating some stuff in a little bit. You can have an unlimited amount of rows, but the one thing that's important to know is that inside, the rows and columns go inside of what's called a container. The container is like a wrapper that wraps around it. Containers are very important as far as how placement of things go on the site. When you build it and you look into like a web format on a desktop, it may look fine, but when you start shrinking it down, things can go a little bit crazy. So always put a container outside of it, and we will start right now by getting into how to do that. So if you have VS Code installed, or if you just downloaded it, go ahead and open up a new window, and I'll drag it over so you guys can see what I'm looking at. All right, so if you open up VS Code, you should get somewhat of a similar view of this. This may look a little different, and this may look a little different because I've been using it for a while. I'm going to open up a new folder. So you can just click on Start here and click Open Folder, or you can go up here to File and then click Open Folder. And then I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this Meetup. You can call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to click OK and select that folder. What that's going to do is it's going to open up VS Code inside of that Meetup folder. Inside of this Meetup folder, I'm going to create one file. And I can go here and click New File. And I'm going to make an index.html file. Enter. Okay, so right now we have a blank file. So before we do anything, we're going to go on to Bootstrap site. Bootstrap site. Let me bring this so you guys can see here. You're going to go to getbootstrap.com. And this is the Bootstrap site. The documentation's on here, and you'll find how to use it. Pretty much everything you're going to need to know or want to know about Bootstrap is going to be on this site. So we're going to go to getbootstrap.com. Make sure up in the right-hand corner here, this does say the 4.5, so we're using the latest version. It should already be defaulted at that, but if it's not, just be aware that that needs to be a 4.5. And then we're going to go here and click the Get Started button. And now we are brought to this introduction page. And it tells you there's a quick start here that tells you how you can plug in your CSS to your HTML. You have your JavaScript files. As I mentioned before, Bootstrap does use some JavaScript for some of its components. And it tells you how to install those here. Or what we're going to do today is we're going to scroll down to where it shows this starter template here. And this starter template has everything we need to get started running Bootstrap. So I'm going to copy this starter template. So I can copy in the right hand. And I'm going to go back to my index.html page and paste it. And there you go. We are now officially running Bootstrap. Let me break down a little bit of what this is. This link reference here is a style sheet. This is the Bootstrap style sheet that contains all the styles and pretty much everything in Bootstrap itself. If you do not have this link properly, or you don't have this link in here at all, you are not running Bootstrap and you will not get any of the access to those styles. These scripts down here are the JavaScript files that you saw on getbootstrap.com. And they, as I said, they work with some of the components of Bootstrap to make them run, because some of them do require JavaScript. All right, so now there's two ways we can view our work here. One is to go and find our index.html file and open it in whatever browser you're using. The other way is, if you remember in my presentation, let's go back to it here. I mentioned we need a plugin called VS Code. It's a VS Code extension called Live Server, and it's by this Ritwick Day. So what that is, and you can find that by going over here on the left, clicking on extensions, searching for them in the marketplace, and as you see, I already have it installed here. You're looking for this. It has over 9 million installs, so it's used a lot. Once you add that, you may have to restart VS Code, which shouldn't be a big deal. After you have this installed, we're going to go back to here, and we're going to save our file, and then we're going to open up a search window by clicking F1. And if this doesn't pop up on the top, you can search for it here by typing in Live Server. And we're going to click Open with Live Server. You can also use Alt-L or Alt-O to open this. And then we're going to click on that. And what this is going to do is this is going to run our index.html file on a browser window. But when we change something in our index, it's going to automatically refresh. So we don't have to go in and constantly refresh our page. It's going to do it for us. So we're going to open this in LiveServe. And I don't know if you noticed, but at the bottom right here, it shows that the server started at port 5500. And here we go. We have our HTML here, our index HTML. If we change something on here, let's go hello world 2, and then save that. And then we go back. Now we have hello world 2. So it's a really quick way for us to actually see our changes in real time. All right, so now let's create something. So I talked a little bit about containers, rows, and columns. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a container. How do we do that? Well, a container is a class container. Everything that Bootstrap has are classes. So in order for us to create one, we're going to create a div, typing div, and then enter. And then inside of our div, we're going to make a class. We're going to call it container. Okay, we're going to save that. And I removed the hello world out of the index. But if we go back to our live server here on the page, nothing's going to change. So a container is just a wrapper that's going to go around everything that we put inside of our HTML in order for it to properly scale from a desktop to a mobile application. All right. So before we get started, I think we're gonna create like a front page, like a kind of like a landing page where you would, and just throw a bunch of different things in here. So what I'd like to talk about now is I mentioned earlier about components. That Bootstrap has a lot of components that you can use, and if we go back to getbootstrap.com, and we're already in the documentation from the starter template. On the left-hand side here, in the menu, you notice it says components. And if you click on that, there are tons of different components that you can look through. And you can play around with these on your own. I'm going to use a couple of them here and show you how to implement them. They're very easy, and a lot of them are very useful. So what's the first thing that we usually see on a web page? Well, we usually see some kind of nav bar like this one up top here. Okay.
Hey, Matt.
So, yeah.
It sounds like your mic's getting a little fuzzy.
I may have to re-jump in here then.
Unfortunately, you are the host, so you dropping will mean...
I'm going to make you the host real quick.
Okay.
And then I will... Okay.
It's still recording.
Okay. Cool. I will be right back.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions so far, now that he's gone?
Yeah, I had a question about actual registration for the Academy.
Okay.
I went on the website and like it has me sign up like I did before. Do I go through that, or am I already in the system?
I would go ahead and do it again because
Okay.
it's a new year.
Okay.
Cool.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you great now.
All right. If it happens again, just give me a holler.
Holler.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
let's
I guess
see.
you could raise my hand. You raise your hand on here. All right. Let's get back to where we were. All
Sweet.
right. My camera turned off too. Okay. Oh well. All right. So back to Bootstrap. So there's a lot of different components here that you can use. As I said, you can scroll through them and use them. But the first thing we see on a website when we go to it is a nav bar. And if you look here on the left, one of the components happens to be a nav bar. So we're going to click on the nav bar components. And there's not just one. There's tons of nav bars in here. And you can choose which ones you want, which ones you don't want. Implementation is going to be pretty much the same for all of them. I'm going to choose, let's see, which one is it? Let's just do this one. This one looks pretty good. So I'm gonna, it looks like it's got a couple different links in here, and then a disabled one, and then I guess you could put an image here if you want. Go back to home. Anyhow, so here's how you implement a nav bar. This is very complicated. You go over here to where it says copy, you click the copy button, and then we're gonna go back to our index.html page. And inside of our container, we're going to paste it. And then hopefully my live server didn't kick off when I left. We're going to go back to our live serve, which is right here. And there we go. Now we have a nav bar. So hard to do. You know, I don't know how people figure this stuff out. Anyhow, so so if you notice here, this nav bar is not the entire length of the page. And that is because we used a container. And what a container is it has these gutters on the side of the sides of the website. So if you've ever gone to a website where it's not full width, well, this is an example of that. If we did want to make this nav bar full width, we would go, and the only thing we'd have to change is instead of doing class of container, we would do a class of container fluid. And we would save that. And then when we go back, now our nav bar is the entire length of the page. So there's a lot of things in Bootstrap where it's not complicated to do, but it can really change the look of how things are displayed. For this one, I'm going to keep this as container because I don't want it the full width for this particular instance. Okay, so there it is. Now we have our nav bar. Now in here, this is not permanent what's in here. You can change, you can edit, you can touch, you can do all sorts of stuff with all the different classes in here. This is just a base for you to build off of. Like for instance, if we didn't want this to say home, we could say we want this to, I don't know, go away for whatever strange reason. And now our nav bar says go away. The one cool thing that I want to show you, and the reason why I copied this, and a lot of people do, is this nav bar is already set up for responsiveness. It's already set up for your mobile phone. And how we're going to check that is we're going to right click on this page. And if you're not using Chrome, you might not have this inspect element here. I think Firefox has it. I think Safari you have to enable the developer tools in your preferences. But if you're using Chrome, this inspect element should be here. And we're going to click on inspect. I think the hotkey is F12 in some browsers as well. Anyhow, so we're going to click inspect, and it's going to open up. I have mine in a separate window. Yours may open up attached to this window here. But regardless of where it opens up, oops, where'd it go? Oh no, there we go. Regardless of where it opens, you are going to have these two options on the top left corner, right here. And this far one is inspect element, so you can click it and then hover over everything and see where it is in actual code. The one next to it is a device toolbar. And what this does is this allows us to shrink the size of our browser without actually shrinking the size of our browser. And I know that doesn't make sense, but I'll show you in a second what it does. So if we click on this, all of a sudden now we have almost like a browser inside the browser, where we can move these panels here and we can see different sizes of screens without actually having to shrink our browser. And you probably already noticed, but as I shrink slowly down, look at that. Our nav bar shrinks with it. Shrinks, and then when we hit a certain point, oh wow. Now we have a hamburger menu, and all of our nav links are in the hamburger menu. So Bootstrap is already set up. This is already set up for a mobile device. So we didn't have to do anything. We just copied it and pasted it in here. That's one of the reasons why Bootstrap is widely used, is because there's not a lot of setup and it's super easy to use. You can also go up here to where it says responsive. I have mine on responsive, so you can drag it left and right. But you can go in here and choose different phone sizes like iPhone 6 or your iPad or whatever. And you can, I think you can even set your own in here. I like to keep mine at responsive so I can see all screen sizes and I don't have to constantly click between them. You can also set some different, your height and width of your screen up here as well. I'd like to just keep it as defaulted and then just kind of slide mine left and right. Anyhow, so now we see that this is already responsive and ready to go, okay? So what I want to do is I want to add a, let's add a hero image right below this nav bar. So it would go roughly in this area. So I did a little bit of cheating beforehand and I already have my image picked out. I don't know if I can send an image link in the chat. Let me see here. It only looks like files. Okay, so what I did is I just did a Google search for how to count 1 billion birds, and I just grabbed this image here in the top left corner. I do want to give a forewarning out there that this is plagiarism, and if you are using a site for any kind of public access, you cannot do this. But since this is a teaching experience and this is for learning purposes only, that I'm allowed to do this. But do not do this if your site goes to commercial or any kind of public access. School and learning, it's all right. So anyhow, I already grabbed this image. If you don't know, you can just right click and save the image. I already grabbed this image out of here, and I am going to go back to my code here. And I'm gonna find it on my desktop and drag it in here real quick. Cool. And you can choose any image you want. I just chose this one because the height of it was not as big as some of the other ones I found. Width is not super important, but you will run into problems with height. If you ever create a website, you need to make sure your image scales properly. Otherwise, it's going to look distorted and just downright weird. And it's not going to look good at all. So anyhow, I just chose this one based off of height, and the bird looked cute. Anyhow, so we're going to add an image into our site here. So if you imagine this image right underneath our nav bar here. Let's remove the mobile looking for now. So right underneath our nav bar here. So we're going to go back to our code and index.html, and we're going to look. And if you click on this nav here that we copied, you can see the end nav. And we want to go right under that nav because we're going to keep everything inside the container. We want it all formatted so that one thing isn't super wide and the other one's really small. We're going to keep it all uniform on the page. And this part's pretty simple. We're just going to hang on, what happened? Oh, sorry. We're going to make, I did forget to mention this part. So we talked about containers and we talked about rows. Now we're going to use one. So to make a row, it's going to be the exact same way we made a container up here. We're going to do a div, and then we're going to make a class, and then we're going to go R-O-W, and that is our row. And then do anybody remember, well, you're not going to talk back to me, I don't think, but what goes inside the rows? A column, right? So we have rows, each row, and then a column goes inside a row. As I mentioned before, you can do this outside of a container, but it will not be very responsive in the long run. So the hierarchy order goes inside your containers, you have your row, and then inside your row, you have your all of your columns. And one thing to point out about columns is you can do more than 12 columns. It's just going to, depending on how many it adds up to be, it's going to overlap into the next line. So ideally, if you want everything on the same line, you want 12 columns. So if I were to do 5 different 12 columns, it's going to be 5 different lines. But it's only going to allow me up to 12 columns in that one row. So, and I'm sure you've already guessed, but how we're going to do a column is do the exact same way we've done a row and container. We're going to make a div, and then we're going to make a class. And then we're going to do, instead of writing column, this one is the short one. It's COL. And then in order for us to specify how many columns, we're going to do a dash and then a number. Well, since we want our image to be the entire container length or width, and we don't want it to look funny by only doing 11, we're going to do 12. And then whatever goes inside of this is going to be our image. Oops, hang on a second. Sorry. So inside of here, all we're going to do is we're just going to add the image property, and this is nothing with Bootstrap. This is HTML. And then we're going to link to our image here. If you put the image on the same level as the index.html, you can reference it directly, or you can do // and it'll give you IntelliSense, and then you can click on the JPEG here. All right, so let's just save that, and we will go and take a look at what that looks like. It's right here. Holy cow, look how big that is. So we got the image in there, but it's really, really wide. And obviously we don't want that for a lot of reasons. So in order to fix that, we're going to come in here, and Bootstrap has a class, again, that we can use in order to make sure that our image is as wide as it possibly can, but not be outside of our container. And so if we go back to here, all we have to do in order to make sure that happens is add the class inside of the image and do img for image dash fluid. Same fluid we would use for the container if we wanted it full width, but this is for images, so we want the image to be full width. All right, and now if we go back, hey, there we go. Now it's the same size as our nav bar up here, but it still looks pretty good. It shrunk down nicely. Now here's the cool thing. Because we put the image fluid in there, Bootstrap is already going to try to shrink it. So if we go back to our inspect and look at what our mobile view looks like, if we shrink it down, it's going to try and shrink the image down. So it looks good. If you tried to do this before, it might not have shrunk down like this. It probably stayed the same length as far wide as it possibly could. It's just trying to fit the entire image in there. This way, we have a responsive image. It looks nice, and it all lines up. So cool. That looks really good. I like what I'm seeing here. So now we're going to add something down here below. Let's see. Bootstrap. We're going to go back to getbootstrap.com. Like I said, this is kind of your resource. You can grab a lot of things off of here. We're going to go back to this Get Bootstrap. I hope you didn't close out of it. If you did, getbootstrap.com. We're going to go into the documentation, and we're going to search for card. So we're going to look for cards. And what cards are, you'll see in a second, is they're just little jobbers here. You can add an image in them if you want, and text and a button. There's a lot of different types they have. They have ones that are smaller, some are bigger, some without buttons. Like I said before, they have tons of different options. They have ones that are called kitchen sink, which are actually my favorite to use. We're going to use one of these for today, but you can add all sorts of stuff in here. As I said, if you really wanted me to go through all of Bootstrap, you'd have to be here for at least 12 hours because there's so much on this site that you could never get through all of it. So we're going to do that same complicated method on how to add the kitchen sink in there as we did before for the nav bar. We're going to come over here and click the copy button, copy it to our clipboard, and we're going to come back to, where did that go? Oh, there it is. We're going to come back to our HTML here, and this time we found where the nav ends. The nav ends here, and then here's our row. So what do you think we're going to do? Well, we are going to go right up. For now, we'll just paste it right here. Okay, and we'll save that. And it's going to look a little funky because there's no image in the top. And when we go back to our site here, okay, so it doesn't look too bad. Okay, still does look a little funky here. Let me remove the mobile view here so you can take a look at what it really looks like. So it still looks a little funky because the image isn't there, but you get the idea. It's generally there. Now, we're going to add 3 of these cards. Okay, so we talked about the columns. We talked about how many can fit into a row. So there's 12 columns per row. So we need to make, if we want to put 3 in here, if we just put these on top of each other, they're literally going to be on top of each other. So we want to be side by side. So in order for us to spread out our cards, we're going to have to adjust the size of the columns. Now we didn't make a column yet, but we will right now. So if we go back to, oops, that's not it. If we go back to our HTML here, notice there's a row here, but we didn't make a row for this card. It's just sitting there. So let's do that. Let's make a row. So we'll go div and class, and then put row here. And then inside of that row, we'll do another div, and then a class. And then we want 3 cards next to each other. So let's see, 12, 3 goes into 12 4 times. So we're going to do column dash 4. And this column dash 4 is only going to reserve, if you would say, 4 spots on out of the 12. So now we can take our whole card, just copy all this, and you can actually just click on it and drag it directly into column dash 4. Now, if you look at this on your page, nothing really has changed. And that's because it was just sitting there before, and column 4 probably goes a little bit further than this. So nothing's going to look different now. But when we add in the rest of them, you'll see what the columns really do. So now I'm going to, if you have a formatter installed, you can format this. It's just going to move. Nothing's changing. It's just going to make it look pretty. So now we're going to take our column 4 class here, and we can see that the end div is here, and we're just going to copy this. And copy this, and then right here next to the, after the last column 4, we're going to paste it, and then we're going to paste it one more time after that last column 4. So now we have 3 columns of 4 inside a row. And I'm going to save this, and now we're going to take a look at what we have. Cool. So now we have 3 columns, or I'm sorry, three cards, and they're all spread out pretty evenly, and they look pretty good. We'll get rid of this image thing. We'll just remove the image for now. That way we don't have to hunt around for another image. But there's one thing I don't really like about it. They are a little bit, like, notice how this side, they're all on the left. This side has a big gutter on it, and this side's pretty butted up to the end. So I think we're going to center this, and I'm going to show you how to do that using Bootstrap. So let's go back real quick, and we'll remove the images. So we'll just take this image out here. That way that doesn't get annoying. And take this image out here. Okay, cool. So how would we originally, if we weren't using Bootstrap, how would we get those images centered? Well, if you listen to one of our previous meetups, Daniel did a topic on HTML and CSS, and I think he introduced this site. It's called flexboxfroggy.com. And if you go to this site, it teaches you all about how to move things left and move things right. Like, for instance, this one you're moving the frog from the, I think you're moving it from the left to the right. And this is what you'd have to write in order to do that. You can also do, it shows up here that there's a center option as well. And this is what we generally would want to do. We want to align everything into the center. So the old way of doing this is you'd have to create a class, go create a CSS file, and then you'd have to mention that you're doing display.flex, and then you'd have to actually justify your content. Flex, in this case, would be center instead of end. But with Bootstrap, notice we haven't made a CSS file yet. With Bootstrap, we don't have to do this. They already have a built-in class for us. So if we go back to our HTML here, we can actually do this directly in Bootstrap by writing a couple classes. And what we're going to write is we're going to do D and then dash flex, meaning display, and then we're going to do a flex. So it's like the first part of that argument in flexboxfroggy. The second part, we're going to justify the content, dash, justify dash content, and then now we're going to give it where we want it. So on the flexboxfroggy instance, it was on the end. Well, we want it centered, so we're going to do send. Cool. And let's save that. And notice I did this on the column and not the row. The reason I did that is because we want the card centered in the column. If we were to put it on the row would trying to be centering itself inside of the container, but the row is already centered in the container, so we put it on the column instead. So now if we go back to, oh, this is the froggy. Here we go. Now if we go back, hey, look at there. So see how this is centered. Now the rest of these aren't centered. Notice that there's a bigger gap in here, a smaller gap in here. So we can go back to our HTML and then just add that class to the rest of the columns. So we'll just copy this, find our column 4 here, paste it, and find our column 4 here, and paste it. Cool. Now when we go back, there we go. Everything looks nice and adjusted, and it looks pretty good. So the other thing you may have noticed is there's no gap here between the image and the cards, and we'll fix that in a minute. But one thing I want to get to is we know that our navbar and we know that our image, as far as responsiveness, works really well. But what about our cards? Okay, if we have column 4s here and we have, let's say, an iPhone 5 or SE with a small little screen, everything's going to look pretty compact. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if we go in here and go to our mobile view here and then shrink this down, whoa, everything gets pretty small. And this, I don't even think this is the smallest setting. Let's go iPhone 5. Oh boy, that looks horrible. Okay, so, but wouldn't it look a lot better if each one of these was in its own column. So like each one of these had a column 12. Well, yes, that would look good, but when we are at full width, that's going to look horrible. And we don't want that. We want it to show 3 on a bigger size screen, and we want it to show 12 on a smaller size screen. So how do we do that? Well, Bootstrap to the rescue again. Bootstrap has these different, you notice they used a lot of dash. Well, dashes on the end of things. Well, you can throw them into columns as well. Now, columns have a special feature that allow them to size differently. And if you actually go to getbootstrap.com and you go into the grid system, so I can go into layout and click on grid. Where did that go actually? Let's go back to the layout. This is a good one here. So it shows these little, whoa, look, container fluid, we talked about that one. These different things we can throw on the end of containers. Small, medium, large, extra large. Well, you can also throw these on columns as well. And what these say is it tells it once you get to a certain size, do something else. So in this instance, we want our columns to remain at 3 until we get to, let's say, 720 pixels looks pretty good. So 720 pixels is going to be 100. It's going to stay at its size, stay at its size, stay at its size, and as soon as it gets smaller, then I actually think it's this size here, 768 pixels. It's going to be 100% in width, which means it's going to blow out and become a container. I'm sorry, column 12. So let's try that. Let's go back to our HTML here, and we'll find the column. And we are going to do, so it says right now, column -4. Well, we want it to stay as a column -4 until it reaches our medium size. So we're going to add in here MD for medium and add another dash. So it's going to spell COL for column -MD for medium, and it's going to stay at size 4 until it hits medium. And let's add that to all of our columns here. MD-4, MD-4. Perfect. And we'll save that. And now let's take a look at what we've got. So we'll go back here to our project. And look, so now they're still the same size. Nothing has changed. But let's take a look at what happens when we start shrinking. So shrinking, okay, looks good here, looks good here. All right, maybe we need to do a little bit bigger. Oh, there we go. Now they're singled out. And we could adjust that a little bit more so it's smaller, bigger. I do happen to know that these sizes in here usually aren't, there's not a lot of devices that use these. They're usually a little bit smaller. Even iPads are roughly here. So this will be fine, especially for mobile devices. And I know you're looking at this and saying, oh, they butt right up next to each other. Well, we're going to cover that along with the stuff up here as well. So, but now it's all responsive. This is what we want. It's big. It's 3 in a row when it's a larger screen, and as it gets smaller, it goes down to a single stack, which is a lot better than what we had before. So as you can see, Bootstrap has these built-in classes that assist you when you get, like I said, we talked about them being mobile first. So they've got pretty much anything you would ever need as far as shrinking and moving and switching around. They've got tons of different classes that you can throw in here. There's even ones that you can reorder things. I could make this card move over here and this card move over here based on different size screens. So there's tons of different things you can do as far as this. This is just the basics of it. Once you get this down, then you can start playing with other things, and everything just kind of falls into place.
Hey, Matt.
So let's take. What's up?
You're getting fuzzy again.
Oh boy. Okay. Let me. Everybody go get a quick drink. I'll be back in 2.5 seconds, hopefully. All right. Thanks for hanging on here.
Really great presentation so far, though. Anyone have any quick questions so far of what they've seen?
Will we get the recording for this Zoom meeting?
Definitely. Yeah, we are definitely recording this time. Last week there was a sad moment when we realized we didn't record, but we're definitely recording this one. It'll be posted probably in the next couple days.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this might be a good time for any questions before I continue. We're going to add a footer down here at the bottom and make all this look a little bit better. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, or you can just shout it out right now. I'm sure James will be answering some stuff as well. But if you want me to continue, I can do that as well.
Yeah, so we had a couple questions. Where is the recording available? There's actually a playlist we have on YouTube. We also post it on our Slack meetup. If you're not on our Slack, we can get you an invite. You can just direct message me your email, and I'll get you an invite to our Slack channel. And as far as notifications, yeah, we send out a notification through our Slack, yeah, definitely can get you a playlist, a URL. I'll track that down for you.
Cool. Yeah, James is the man when it comes to all that. He's been pretty on top of that. So this will also be the files that we've created and also the presentation. There's more slides of the presentation that talk about some of the stuff that I've been showing on here. Those will also be in our GitHub repo. This shouldn't be up, or it should be up pretty quick here. So anyhow, let's hop back into what we've been doing here. It's over here. Okay, cool. All right, so we have these cards, and they're pretty bunched up against this image here. And as we've also noticed that they are, when we single stack them, they're right on top of each other. So let's take care of the top part first. So as you might have guessed by now, Bootstrap has something for this. Normally when we do minor tweaks like this, it would be adding a little bit of margin or adding a little bit of padding to the top of these. Well, Bootstrap has built-in classes that they have built-in classes that we can use in order to add margin or add padding to whatever side we want. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. As I said before, it's super complicated on how to do it, so you better bear with me. Right now we want, so let's take a look at what we have. So we have a row here, and it contains all of our cards. And on our project over here, we want all the cards to move down. So we're going to target that row, and we are going to add margin to the top of that row. So here it is, the complicated part of how to add padding. We're going to type M for margin, and then we're going to do T for top. We're going to add a little dash, and then we're going to give it a number. Now margins and paddings go from 1 to 5, so you can't go 55 if you want. They're measured in, I believe they're measured in REMs. So it's not for something huge that you need to move, but it's enough that you can get by putting this in for little things like this. So let's just try a number. We'll try a 3. Might even be too much. And we'll save that, and let's check it out. Oh, nope, that's actually pretty good. I like that. 3. Okay. So a 3, and notice that moved it down. Cool. So now we fixed that, but the margin is not going to stick with these when we shrink it because it's on the row. So as we shrink it, they're still going to be on top of each other. So now there's 2 ways you can do this. You can go back and add the margin to every single card, or because I want to show you another feature of Bootstrap, we're going to mess around with margins when they hit a certain size. So if we go back to here, and let's say let's just say we're going to add here. So what do we want? We want it to move. We want margin on the top when it's shrunk like this for the second card. So let's say, okay, cool. Let's do that. So we'll go back in here. Here's our second card, our column. We know how to do margin top. It's the MT, so we're going to do MT-3, and we're going to save it. Cool. That should fix our problem. So we go back, And cool, there it is. Now we have margin on the top of the second card. But when we expand it again, now our cards are off because we have three margin on the card, the second card, and we have 3 margin on the row. So what we need to do is tell it we don't want any margin until we get to the medium size. So it's going to be similar to how we did these here, how we did a column -4 and we changed it to column -MD-4. But there's a little catch, because if you remember, that one was saying, okay, we want it to say column 4 until a certain size, and then after that it's going to go blow out to column 12. Well, this way is the other way around. We don't want it to happen until we get to a certain size. So in order to do that, we're going to go back in here, and we can actually stack these. So we can go in here and say, okay, let's start at the very beginning. So what do we want? We don't want any margin. So we want margin top -0. We just want no margin at all until we get to medium. So we want no margin until we get to medium -MD -0. And then after that, we want our margin to be 3. Let's try that and see what happens. All right, looking good so far. So we have 0 margin right now on the top of this second card. And we'll start shrinking, and shrinking, and shrinking. Oh, there we go. And now we have our margin back. So you're telling Bootstrap exactly when you want the margin and when you don't want the margin. And you can add on to these if you really felt like it. For whatever reason, I would have no idea why you'd want this, but you could go margin top when it's past medium, but it's before small, or what the heck's going on with my mouse? When it's past medium, but when it gets to small, then I want it to be 1. Or I'm sorry, when it's going till medium, when it hits medium, it's 0. Then when it's small, it's 1. And then after small, when it gets to extra small, it goes to 3. So speaking of extra small, while I'm on that topic, I'll just mention that here. There's extra large, there's large, and there's medium, and then there's small. Before Bootstrap 4, there was an extra small. Currently now, there is still an extra small, but if you put XS in here, it is not going to work. Extra small is the default when you don't have anything here. So this, for instance, if I were to just do column without anything at the end of it, that would basically be saying column -extra small -4. When it hits extra small, it's going to blow out to 12. It's defaulted to do that. So if you're looking around on online and you find something that says, oh, extra small, well, if you're using Bootstrap 3, you can use the extra small, but after Bootstrap 3 and Bootstrap 4, all the way up to 4.5, and I'm assuming further, you cannot use extra small. So anyhow, we're going to stay at 0 until we hit medium, and then we're going to go to margin top 3. So let's add this to our third one, because remember, our third one here still doesn't have margin top. We're going to add this to the third one. We're going to save that, and now let's take a look at what it looks like. Cool. Now they're all lining up perfectly. We have our nav bar here. Everything's nice, looking good. All right, cool. And when we shrink out, very nice. All right. So last thing I want to do for this this project here. Is that a question?
Oh, yes, I have a question.
Yep.
So if you wanted to see how the CSS looks for putting classes from Bootstrap onto elements, isn't there a tool in the browser that can show us what that would be?
Yes, I think I understand what you're asking. You're asking, is there a way that I can see what classes are being applied to it and how they're affecting that element?
Yeah, I believe so. Just because in your example that you're using, we're applying those classes repeatedly, right? But
Correct.
if we wanted to apply them all to one to create our own class in the CSS, and we wanted to know what that looked like, right? Instead of putting MT-3.
Yeah. So I think I understand what you're saying. So
yeah.
you're talking about creating your own custom classes and how that would look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can definitely do that. I think Daniel went over it in a previous meetup. But basically what you do is this, when we scroll up to the top of our, let me go here. When we scroll up to the top of this page, this this link here for the Bootstrap CSS, this is their Bootstrap, but you can still apply your own Bootstrap link in here by adding a CSS file and then linking it in here, and you can add your own styles. So it's not like you're just stuck using Bootstrap. You can add your own styles, and then you can add your margin top as well.
Oh no, yeah, I knew that. I meant more so along the line of because I don't remember where I saw it, but they were inspecting a page and
Okay, so you're talking about the inspect. Yeah, you can do that too. So on your inspect element here, on the right side, you can see all the styles that are being used on whatever element you're highlighting here. So let's say, so that little thing next to the one we were using for the devices.
Yeah.
If you click on that, and you can hover over these, and then let's just say we're clicking on here, and then once you hover on that, you can go to the right, and you can see all the styles in here. You can add styles, and you can uncheck them and things like that as well.
That's right. Oh, okay, so that's how we would see what a class would look like if we wanted to implement it or tweak it or what have you.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to tweak it, you may have to add what's called important on the end of your CSS, because you might not be able to override the class depending on how it's running in the hierarchy. But you can definitely override things if you need to.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, cool. So now we're going to add a footer on here, and we're going to use, let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's actually, instead of, I don't think Bootstrap actually has footers, so we're going to actually create our own. And how we're going to do that is we are going to scroll down. So I'm gonna just for example here on how things can look and you can do things in Bootstrap. I'm not gonna make the footer the same width as everything else. I'm gonna make it the entire length of the page. So in order to do that, we need to find our container up here at the top, because remember, containers constricts it to the smaller size that it is now. If you wanted it the full length, you'd use container-fluid. So we're going to find the bottom div that this container is attached to, which is right here. Okay, and then we are going to, down here, because we want our footer to be the entire length of the page, or I'm sorry, the entire width of the page, we are going to do a container fluid right here. So we are not inside the other container, we are outside the other container just below it. So another way, I didn't talk about this before, but you can write a quick way of adding classes, and instead of doing div and then in here going class and then writing out your thing, you can actually do dot and then type your class name, container, and then dash fluid, and then click enter. And it's already going to make you a div and add a container fluid class for you. So that's just something that we like to use a lot. One, because we're programmers and we're lazy, but also because as you start writing these and knowing what you need, and it speeds up the process, so it doesn't take 5 hours to do a project when it could take you 4. Because after a while, and if you're writing a bigger project, you use a lot of these classes over and over and over and over again. So it's just a quicker way of writing things. And you can do this for any class. It's not just Bootstrap. You can do it for any class that you've already made yourself. If you made a class of, I don't know, Z, you could do .z and do the same thing. So anyhow, so inside of this container fluid, we're going to make a row. So .row, enter. And then inside of our row, we're going to make a .col-12, column 12, because we want it the entire length. Perfect. Okay. So now inside of here, we are going to excuse me, we're gonna just we're just gonna give it some text. I'm just gonna do it H2, and I'm just gonna say this is my footer. Okay, perfect. Now we have a footer. Now let's take a look at what that looks like. So if we go down here, all right, okay, well we have a footer, but the text is way over here to the left, and there's no real way of actually telling that it's a footer. So we need to make that those two changes. First change we're going to do is let's move the text into the middle. Bootstrap, we talked about justify content center. This will move it into the middle. However, the text itself, it moves whatever's inside of it. It moves that entire wrapper into the center. So if I were to put that here, it would move this entire class into the center. If I also there's a wacky thing because of the way that the display element in Flex works. If you add this to the H2 and then let's say this text was really, really long, once you get to a certain point, it actually won't be in the center anymore. It'll be aligned to the left. So we're going to use a different class that's built into Bootstrap to help us out with this, to make sure that it stays in the center the entire time. And that class is where you're going to do class here on our H2. And again, this is something that you can look up on getbootstrap.com and it's in there. But it's text, because we want the text to move, and dash, and then we want to move it to the center. So text dash center. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Most of these classes that they have in here make sense as far as what you want to do with it. They're not super complicated, like, oh, move left, right. It's pretty simple. You want the text, you want to move it into the center. So if we save that, and we go back to our page, now our text is in the center. Perfect, exactly what we wanted. And that's going to stay in the center all the way down till we get to the tiniest of tiny. And it's going to stay, notice it stays in the center here. If this was a D-flex, this would all be on the left. This would not be centered. All right, cool. So we have that part taken care of. Now what we want to do is we want something to distinguish that this is an actual footer, because just text saying this is my footer is not really telling us anything. So let's go back to here, and we actually let's do this. Let's go back to getbootstrap.com real quick, and I wanna talk about colors, because I don't know if we'll have time to move on to the next thing that I have after this. I want you to go into the documentation where it says search and type in colors. I don't know why my mouse is acting weird. All right, cool. So we type in colors, and the first thing that pops up is all this color stuff. Bootstrap has built-in colors that you can override. They are defaulted to certain colors, like I said before. These are the text. Let me scroll down. I think there's a better image. Here we go. Anything primary color is going to be this blue, secondary is this gray, success is this green, dangers, etc. And you can go all the way down here. This BG in front of it tells you that it's a background color. This can be added to multiple things. It can be added to buttons. It can be added to text. It can be added to, I think they have alerts that you can add to. You can add it to pretty much anything. However, it's not going to have this BG before it because that is background. If it's a button, it's say BTN, or if it's text, it's going to say text dash whatever. So they have these built-in classes, and what's cool about them is that they are customizable. So let's say I have a site that's 18 pages long, and I put button dash primary, and I send it off to the client, and he says, no, I don't like that that blue primary color. Well, guess what? Instead of actually going through all of your CSS files and saying, hey, change this button, I need to change every individual button to a different color, you can just change the primary color, override the primary color in your CSS, and now all of your buttons have changed. So this is really, really handy as far as keeping track of what colors things are. We use this a lot. Usually the primary and the secondary, because usually you have two main colors on your website, and then obviously like success and danger for errors or success registrations and things like that. Anyhow, so we are going to grab this class here. I think we should let's use the dark so it really looks like a footer. So we're going to add background dash dark. I'm just going to copy this. We don't need the dot. Dot just means that if you've ever worked in CSS, the dot comes before the class. That's how you know it's a class. hence how you can shorthand it in HTML by writing dot. So we're just going to add this. We're going to actually add it directly to the row. You could probably add it to the column, but columns have gutters, and sometimes the gutters can be just enough to notice that the entire width isn't exactly covered in the color that we want. So we're going to add it to the row, and the row should take care of everything. You could even add it to the container fluid if you really wanted to. I just decided to add it to the row here. And if we go back to our hello world here, there we go. Now we got we have a, let's turn this off so it's easy to see. We have a footer. Very cool. Okay, but as you notice, we can't see our text anymore. That would look really good if this was white. Well, you remember we were talking about text has all this different things, text center, text, we use background color and all that. Well, guess what? They actually have standard colors. So we can go in here and say, hey, we also want this to be white. So we're going to go text-white. We're going to save that. And now when we go back here, hey, there we go. Now our text is white. Cool. And I'm sure you guys remembered the shorthand little code to make this off of the card title here, correct? Margin top. So we're going to go back to our index here real quick. And let's just add a margin top to the entire container. -5, because the entire container is the thing we want to move down. And save that and go back. And cool. Now we actually have a little bit of separation here. So this looks all pretty cool. There's one other thing I want to show you guys before I open it up for questions. It is actually pretty cool. Have you ever noticed on some of the websites you visit, especially on a mobile phone? Let's shrink this down to, let's say, an iPhone, for instance. So notice the nav bar. So it stays at the top, and then it stays at the top. So you can't get back to the nav bar unless you scroll all the way back up to the top, and then you can click on it. Well, Bootstrap has this very cool thing built in, and it is called sticky top. And what that does is it causes anything to stick to the top of the page. So what we want to do is we want our nav bar to stick to the top. And so we're going to actually go back to our HTML here, find our nav bar, and because it's nav, N-A-V, notice they use background light in here. This is just something I want to point out. You could change just the background dark and make everything dark. Everything's customizable, as we said before. Anyhow, so to make it sticky on the top, we want the nav to be sticky. We don't want the container, because that would be in all of our elements of the card and everything. We don't want that. We want the nav. So what we're going to do in here is we are going to add a class of sticky. Oops, sticky and top. And we're going to save that. And now, when we go back, look at that. Our nav bar stays at the top. Very cool. And we can open it and close it just like we normally would. Very cool. And if you have a long scrolling page, it would even work on your desktop as well. So pretty cool stuff. So hey Louie, how much time do you want for your thing?
Well, if you have some more things you want to talk about, that's okay.
Okay. I mean, I don't have to. I mean, I could. Does anybody have any questions right now up to this point?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off what you did for a little bit.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So I did have one other thing I wanted to show you guys, and it deals with forms, because everything has forms these days. You fill out forms, for everything. I mean, even if you don't think about it, you're filling out a form. Every time you go into Google and you search, you're filling out a form. So I think if I can squeeze this in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to see if I can do a form on here. But luckily, because Bootstrap is so awesome, it already has forms available. So let's go back to our index.html and make another index page here. Let's just go over here to the right, and we'll add another HTML file. And we'll call this index2.html. Enter. Cool. All right, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but on your live serve, down here at the very bottom right where my mouse is, I don't know if you see my mouse, but it shows a port here. And you can click on this to close the server and to live share again. Once you have this installed, it's pretty much always going to be down here on the bottom right. But the very first time, you may have to go in and do it like we did. But if you wanted to open this page, you could either navigate to it in the browser itself, or you could just click on this page and then click Go Live, and it'll launch this page that we're working on. So let's make a form. So what's the first thing we do? Go to getbootstrap.com, and we copy our, let's see, we go to the home. We go click on Get Started once this loads. You can also just click on Documentation. It's the same link. And we're going to grab our starter template, copy that, and then go to our new index page. It's empty, and paste that in. We'll just save that, and let's just navigate over, make sure it's working. Go back to our hello world. We may need to refresh this. Oh, that's because it's still on here. Whoops, I'm sorry. It opened up in a different one. Let's do this. Go index 2. Oh, did I not? Oh, I didn't serve it. I don't think I served it. Nope, I didn't serve it. There we go. Let's click Go Live. That would help. There we go. All right, now we're back to our hello world at the very beginning. Cool. All right. So we're going to go, since we want a form, and Bootstrap has forms, we're going to type in form and click on the components of form. And you could go through here, the components, and scroll through them. I just prefer to search them. And if you can't find anything in here, but you know there's something that Bootstrap has, you can go and search Google, and you can say Bootstrap form, and pretty much every time it will pop up. So not only is their documentation really good, but they've been around long enough that you can find everything on Google. So there is tons of forms here. If you look at the scroll bar on your top right, I mean, it is huge how much stuff they have in here. And you guys can play around with this. I'm just going to grab this little form here at the top. Pretty simple, not too much to it. We're going to click copy like we always do. And we are going to go back to our index 2. And I'm going to remove this hello world H1 like we did before. And I'm just going to paste in that form. And now if we click save, what do we think is going to happen? Well, it's not inside a container, so it might look a little weird. So let's go to our index here. Oh yeah, it's pretty large. So, but we have it in here, and we can see
Matt.
that everything. Good. Yeah.
Yep, it's that time again.
Oh boy. All right. You know, I don't know if it's my mic, but you know, I'll tell a story when we get back. Hang on a second.
Yeah, that's gonna be story time soon. Sweet.
All right. How about now?
Sounds good.
All right, I'm really sorry about this, folks. So we live in a neighborhood that's rather old, and we have a bunch of pine trees in the back of our yard. And there happens to be squirrels that live on those pine trees. Well, they really, really like, for whatever reason, to chew on our phone lines and our power lines. So about every 2 to 3 years, we have to have somebody come out and replace them. Well, it's around that 2 to 3 years, so I can't help thinking that has something to do with it. But thanks for bearing with me, guys. I was sorry about all that. Anyhow, so let's get back on here real quick and take a look at our form again. All right, cool. So we have it in here, but because it's not inside a container, it looks horrible. So we're going to fix that. We're going to go back to our index here, and we're going to add a container. I don't want this container fluid because I don't want it the entire width. We're going to do dot container. And then we're going to do dot row, like so. And for now, let's not put a column in here because we are going to actually move the everything around a little bit because I don't like the email address and stuff being that long. So let's just drag this inside the row for now. Right there. Cool. Okay. And if you save this, you will notice something really funky pretty quick. Let's go back here. Oh, actually, I didn't do it this time. Interesting. Anyhow, there's this weird thing sometimes, depending on where your form and your row is positioned. Oh, actually, I think it'll show it in a second. Anyhow, sometimes your form has to be outside of your row, and I don't know why, but I think that has something to do with the way that the columns and the row interact and the way the form is trying to keep everything together. Anyhow, so if it does it, you'll see what I mean. If everything looks really wacky and not in line like this, then you'll know something's up. So I think it might already be happening, but just not as much. So we are going to, actually it is happening. Notice how everything's small and it was big before? I didn't actually pay attention. That's because the form is inside the row. So we're gonna take this form and move it outside of the row, or put the row inside the form, and then save it again. And now everything's looking really, really, really weird. And this is actually what we want. But the reason it's looking weird is because everything is in a row. There's no columns to separate it out. So that's going to be our next step. We're going to go back into here. And this is our first element, the email address. And notice it's inside a form group. This is another class that helps out with forms. And then this form control really helps out with the input of forms. And I will show you what it looks like without that. And you will see why it's so important. So inside of our row, we're going to make, let's just make 2 column 12s for now. And we'll put this first form, this email address inside the column 12 here. And then we'll do the same, .col-12. We'll do the same for this password here. And then while we're at it, we'll put this checkbox in one as well. Remember I said that you can do multiple columns, it's just going to go on a different row. But in a different row is a bad way of saying it, but it's going to go on a different line. It's all inside the same row. So we're going to go like this and put it inside here. Cool. And then that submit button's all right for now. We'll deal with that later. I'm going to fancy everything up, make it look nice. Cool. Now if we go back, there we go. Now it looks better. So notice how these are super, super long. So now we're going to do the same thing. Well, not the same thing, but we're going to shorten these up because I really don't like my password being this long and my email address that long, because who has one that long? Unless you're on a mobile phone, you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But this password and email are way longer than they should be. So we're going to move this password field up to the right of this email address. And how we're going to do that is we're going to make the column, instead of a 12, we're going to turn it into a column 6. Okay, so each one of these, because these are full length, we're going to go column 6. And if I can move my mouse, we're going to do column 6 for this one and save that. And that should fix our problem. There we go. Now they're a little bit shorter. But as you may have guessed, what happens when we shrink it down again? So we go back to that responsiveness thingy that we talked about. And as we shrink it down, okay, it looks good, looks good, looks good. But when I get onto my phone, that is so small, I don't even think I can put my email address in there and see the entire thing. So now we want it to go on the separate line. So we talked about how we add like the medium and the large in there. Well, here's a good example of why you'd want to do that, especially on forms, because a lot of forms you don't want them super long with the super wide text box. You want them next to each other, but when you get to a mobile device, you want them the entire width. So now is a perfect time to use. Let's see. I think medium will work again, but let's try that. So we'll go in here, and let's add our MD dash for the email address, and MD dash for our password. The check me out's okay. It's doing all right. We don't need to worry about that. Okay, cool. So they're still side by side, and then as we get closer, there we go. Now they're one on top of each other. Very cool. Notice that the submit button is not inside where you would think it would be. And remember, we didn't put a row or a column on that yet. It's just inside the row. Remember I talked about Sometimes the column has little gutters on the sides and the rows don't. Well, here's a good example of that. This submit button is in the row, but not in a column. The column has gutters, so it's actually padded a little bit on the right and left side. But because this is not inside a column, it is forced all the way to the outside of the row. So just something to keep in mind. So let's fix that real quick. We'll fix that submit button. And everybody sees that it's bright and blue. So what's your guess? I'm guessing it's a button primary color. Oh yeah, look at that, button primary. Okay, so that primary color being used again. Pretty cool. So let's add this into a column-12 real quick. Cool. And you hold down the Option button on your keyboard. You can actually click the up and down keys, and it will move your line for you. Just another little hint. And then let's save this. Head on back over. All right, cool. Now it's all lined up. Nice. Looks really good. Excellent. But there's a problem with this. Obviously, you'd have a header and everything up here, but we're not going to go into this. But I don't like the fact that the submit button is on the left side where your checkbox is. I'd rather have it over here on the right. And the reason is that way you don't accidentally hit the submit when you hit the checkbox. And plus, it's a little more appealing. When you think about flipping a page, you turn the page from right to left. Well, when you're done, you don't want to look like you're going back. You want to go forward. So let's move this button over here to the right. Okay. And remember, we talked about, oh, you could do text-align. But what that's going to do is that's going to align the text in here. But what was the other thing we did? Oh, Flexbox Froggy, that's right. We did the flex, and then we did justify content center. But we don't want center on this one. So we want to move it to the end. So let's try doing that. So we'll go in here, and we're going to add this directly to the column because we want the entire, anything inside the column to move. And we're going to go D-flex. Then we're going to go justify content end. Cool. And let's see if that works. Very cool. Now we have the button over here. But I don't like the blue color either. I might be picky, but I don't like the blue as a submit. I'd rather have green as a submit. And if we remember, and if we go back to our Bootstrap and we type in colors, and we search for that, and we click on our colors. Ooh, look at that. That's green. That's exactly what I want. It's a success button. Cool. So it's success. So all we have to do is go back to our index, or our HTML, I'm sorry, and change it from primary to success. And save that. And we go back, and bam, there it is, a green submit button. Cool. Let's add one more thing real quick. Most of the time when you go to a form like this, there's two things you want to do. Maybe three, but we'll do two for now. You want to submit the form, or you want to cancel. Sometimes people click the cancel button. Other times they close the browser. We're going to add a cancel button in case they want to do that. So let's add another button. So we'll go back to our HTML, and we'll just copy this button here. So we'll select it, copy it, and then paste it underneath here. Cool. Which button do I want to have as the submit button? Let's have the one closest to the user. So we'll try this. Actually, we'll leave the submit button on the top, and we'll do the cancel on the bottom. We'll click cancel here, and now we go back. Cool. Now we have a submit and a cancel. There's a couple problems. If something's green, it should mean go. But we don't want the cancel to be green. Let's go back to the colors again on Bootstrap. So we go back here. Red. Danger. I like that. Let's use that as the cancel instead. So we copy our danger, go back to our HTML, paste our danger in the cancel, save it, and we're going to go back. There we go. That looks a lot better. Almost like Christmas colors. But I still don't like that. There's something about that cancel button that just makes it too enticing to want to click. Let's take a look at Bootstrap buttons. So go back to Bootstrap, and this time instead of colors, we're going to look at Bootstrap buttons. There we go, buttons. Click on the buttons. So here's all the ones we've been looking at. The primary, secondary, success, danger, etc. Let's scroll down a little bit. Here we go. This looks more what I want. Look how this is still red, but when I hover over it, then it lightens up. I think this will look a lot better on our form. And if you notice, the only thing we have to add on it is this outline in between the button and the primary, or whatever the color may be. Let's grab the outline, go to our index, paste that right here next to the danger at a dash, save it, and then let's go back and take a look. There we go. That looks a lot better. That way the submit looks way more enticing to click than the cancel. But we still have that little bit of problem between the two buttons that they're butting each other. Never fear, margin left is here. And I think we remember how to do that. Let's go in here and add it to the button itself. So M for margin, L for left, dash, and let's try, I think a 2 would be good here. Maybe even a 1. Let's try 1. Save. Let me go back. There we go. Now that looks a lot better. So as you can see, everything in Bootstrap really is to help you. There's so many different classes, as you've seen on getbootstrap.com. There's so much stuff on there. It's really impossible to cover it all. But I do want to show you one cool thing. If you go back to your index.html and you find your link up here that has all your style sheets, and you comment that out or remove it completely, and then save and go back, this is what your form would look like before Bootstrap. It's really, really incredible how Bootstrap was able to come up with a design in order to make everything look so much more appealing. This looks like a form from ages ago that I would actually be very skeptical about filling out. But if we uncomment this, oops, this looks like a up-to-date modern form. So Bootstrap is an excellent way in order for you to achieve modern look, but at the same time, very easy, it's free to use, and they're constantly pushing updates. Like I mentioned, Bootstrap 5 will be coming out in the near future. So if you have any questions, go ahead and fire away in the comments or go ahead and talk, and then I will turn it over to Louie here. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, Matt. Really good job there.
Hey guys, can you see me?
Sure
Can you hear me?
can.
Okay. So my name's Louie. I'm a designer and developer at CodeStack. And in our time, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Matt and talk about something Frankie talked about. And you might hear a cat in the background, and my cat's name is also Frankie. Coincidence. He likes to meow really loud. But Frankie, I think what you were talking about was designing in the browser using the inspect elements. And that's something we do here a lot, the design team. It's really quick, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Is that what you're talking about, Frankie? Frankie's asleep?
No, I'm still here. Actually, no, I just wanted to get across that instead of, you know, when you find yourself repeating, putting that class in your HTML over and over again, you know, you find that it's better to make your own class and apply it to, you know, all of your elements of the selector instead. That's all I was trying to get across.
Okay, that's what I'm going to show you guys. We'll do it real quick. And besides that, I think there might be time. Let me ask all of you guys, are any of you freelancing right now, or do you plan to? Anyone? Okay, no responses. So what I'm going to do, if there's time, go over a little bit of the things that you should take into consideration when you freelance dealing with clients, kind of a little business things and looking out for gotchas and stuff like that. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so talking about adding your own CSS files and stuff like that. So this is the starter template that Matt was talking about. Matt, can you see this?
Yeah, I sure can.
Okay, just want to make sure. So what you would do is, some people have different philosophies, but what I do is I always don't touch the default Bootstrap files, right? So what you would do is you would create your own custom style sheet and paste it below this one. Because the term cascading style sheets means it cascades down a stack. So whatever becomes last overwrites what was before it. Now, I'm not saying you should always go and overwrite stuff that Bootstrap has, but if you want to write your custom styles, you don't want Bootstrap overwriting it. you know, because that can be the case. So let's take a look. So let's imagine that we're dealing with the CodeStack website. Okay, and this uses Bootstrap, but you can see a lot of these styles aren't in Bootstrap. But let's say you wanted to change stuff. So instead of, if you don't know CSS well, going into Bootstrap and looking for a class, seeing if there's a color that matches or an element, what you would do is you just go here, right? So I'm using Firefox, which may be a little bit different, but. So we go to the inspector, and if you highlight something, you can kind of see all the styles in it and stuff. But let's say, let's design something in here, and then we'll copy and paste it, and we could put it in our own custom CSS file. Let's say you wanted this to be a button, this upcoming events, right? So if you look over here, this H2, it doesn't, well, it has a class and for, what is that, for margin bottom 4. But it doesn't really have anything else, right? But let's say if you go over here, this may be a little bit different on the browser, but under here it has elements. So this is kind of generic. So let's change the color of the text to white. Okay, you can't see it, but it's there, right? You kind of see it. And let's say you wanted the background. Right now, the background, when you hover over it, it's kind of long. Let's see. But that's okay. Let's say we wanted that, right? So we'll click below. And we'll type in background black. Okay, but let's say we wanted rounded edges, kind of similar to this, right? So let's see, what is, so they're using a border radius of 20. So we'll match the same thing. So we'll click our element here. Was it 20? Oops. I typed it wrong, so it gave me an error. All right, so there we have like a new element that could be a button. And so what you could do in this area is you right click it, copy the rule, and then you would go into your text file and you just paste it. And you would change this to whatever. Whoops. Oh, I can't type, but.
We can't see your text file.
Oh, you can't see my text file? Oh, that's right. We got to share everything, right? Do not know how to do that.
I think you can just drag it into the screen.
No?
Maybe not.
Can you see it?
Nope.
Okay. Well, let's pretend that I dragged it into a CSS file. But yeah, you can just, instead of, when you copy and paste this, instead of element, you would just change this to dot whatever class you wanted to add, and drop that into your site, and then you could use it all over the place. So Frankie, I think that's what you were talking about. Is that close?
Well, yeah, I've actually never used that tool before, designing the browser. It's like I said, I mean, I think this is what I saw though, being able to see the context of what that class looks like right there for an element. So I think as far as the tool goes, I think so. But yeah, that's awesome, Louie.
Yeah, it's the same tool. So like the cool thing on most of these, like see for the background, can you guys see this little down here? You can click this little color picker and change it. So you can do stuff like that. And for the color of the text too, right? You can do a lot of cool things. But yeah, if you wanted to see, in fact, if you go to a website that you like and you're like, how in the heck did they do that, right? So, I mean, there's nothing, this is a nice looking website, but it's kind of basic, this stuff. But if you wanted to see how they did this, you know, it's all right here. And you could like play with the styles. If you wanted to, that's not border radius, want to bring this down a little bit to like 5 pixels. So now it hardly has any rounded edges. So you can play around and learn from other websites, right? And kind of see the structure and and how the CSS is applied. So that's a nice thing.
Could you, I'm sorry, I already forgot. Could you actually point, where are you at? You're in the inspector, and oh, you're on Firefox though. Yeah, so does this tool also, you can also grab it with Chrome?
It should be almost exactly the same. Would you say that?
Same.
Yeah, it's the same for Chrome, and it's the same for Edge.
Cool.
Yeah, it might be a little bit different, but yeah. So, but you can see like where I was working over here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you're able to inspect all your styles and everything. And honestly, this is faster a lot of times, especially when you're first starting to build a website. You probably have a design already. Either you made a mock-up in Adobe XD or Photoshop or something like that, and then you kind of build it how you think it should go. But then when you look at it, it's usually not going to look right. And instead of you always to us, it's quicker to go in here, fiddle around because you see it instantly, and then once you got it, you copy that code and take it back into your project. So it's a real fast way of working is what I'm trying to say. Does anyone have any questions about this kind of stuff, something I could show them about working in the browser? Because otherwise I'm going to switch topics. No? Okay. Well, no one even asked to hear the other topic I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it anyways. And that's protecting yourself, right? As a web developer, especially working for yourself. And I'm going to provide a link for my old contract. I scrubbed out the client's name and everything, but let's see if we could take a look at my contract. How about that? Let me pull it up. Give me a second here. Let me see if I could do it still in this browser, since I don't really know how to operate Zoom very well. Okay, can you guys see this? All right, I'll take the silence as a yes, but I don't really know. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a lot of problems. I don't know how experienced you guys are, but there's a lot of problems dealing with clients, especially when you're new. And to be honest, if you're new, all the problems you run into, every other designer's probably run into them before. It's all the same. It'll be new to you. So I ran into a lot of these things. So I can't take credit for this completely for this contract because when I was starting, I went to a lot of design forums and heard everyone talking about this, and some other experienced people started showing people their contracts, and I kind of cobbled this together from different contracts and ideas people had. But the important part is the introduction, which says always do my, let me skip to the, well, the main thing is in this contract, you won't find any complicated legal term or long passages. I have no desire to trick you into signing something. What I want to do is best for both parties. And I asked them personally, make sure you read this. It's not very long, right? So we go over what they're asking for, their specifications. And then over here, I talk about like how many changes they get. I'll present you with an idea, like 2 ideas. If you don't like that one, I'll present with 1 more. And you'll have opportunities to review the work and talk about what I do with browser testing and payment. The key thing is I always like to get half right up front, right? Don't wait until the last time because you'll get people, especially when you're starting, who will stiff you, and that's not good. This is an important one. Like you may have a contact, right? Let's say the company is more than 1 person. You may have a contact and they're assigned to deal with you, the web designer, and you show them all their stuff. The key thing is they have to be a person who has final say, or they have, before they say, okay, I approve this step, if they don't have final say, they need to run it by the people that have final say, because often you'll get someone who will say, it looks great. And they'll keep saying, it looks great, or make this slight change. And then when it gets to the final step, when you've spent all your time, the person who's really in charge will say, I don't like it. We need to change it. And if you don't have this stuff in your contract, you can't point to it and say, look, I had in here, the person reviewing needs to be a person who has final say. It's extremely important. Also, legal stuff. This contract is for a WordPress site. And if anyone's dealt with WordPress, you know that new releases happen and require new versions of PHP, plugins stop working, and you don't want to be responsible for that. If you're building a WordPress site, 5 years down the line, they're asking you to fix things that are broken. So I have in here that I can't guarantee it will break in the future. And actually I had a newer one that explained why this was the case, and that you know, I might be available to fix something in the future for breaks, but it will cost. Okay, this is an old contract from 2013. I don't really do freelance anymore. So yeah, and I'm saying basically in the terms at the end, work can't even start until this has been signed, as someone is authorized to sign it. It talks about when the payment should be made. Sometimes, for me, it's usually 50% up front, but if it's a long project, it may be 25, and then at certain landmarks, there's more, and then, at the end, you get the rest of it. But I was skipping through it. So one of the things, let's see here, let me see if I can find it real quick. One of the things that's in here, but I'm not sure where it is, but I'll tell you what it is the like feature creep, right? They may say, oh, Louie, we want a website that has a shopping cart and something else. And you build it and they're like, you know what? We want this and this too. Or they'll say that in the middle of the contract or something. And in here, and what I tell people is, okay, here's what we're gonna do. And it should be in your contract so they expect it. And if they forget, you point it to them. That if they do that, or if they change their mind on direction, that contract gets closed out and they pay for all work up to that point. And a new contract gets built and signed for the rest of it. These things will save your behind. So I'm gonna post a link. Hopefully you guys care about this because it is a problem. Can you guys see that little link right there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so if you're interested in downloading this, copy that link down. And on this one, I had on completion of project, full payment is required within 7 days. Sometimes if it's like a government organization, they can't pay that quickly. But just kind of fill that out. But that's the basics of what I wanted to show. Actually, I was going to show, believe it or not, Flexbox Froggy, but I'm not going to show that anymore. He already showed that to you. So is there any questions on anything I talked about, or any questions about design overall? Any projects you want to show me so I could critique or anything like that?
At this time, no.
I like you guys are talkative. Thank you, Frankie.
Yeah. How do you copy the link, if I might ask?
How do you copy?
Yeah.
Could you just post it in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that. Yeah. Okay, give me a second.
Okay.
Where's chat? There it goes. It should be in there now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Liz, I see what you said. You don't know if you'd be going independent contracting, but yeah, it's cool. The information still applies. If you're working for a large company. Okay, I see someone else. Okay, yeah, if you're working for a large company, it's good to keep these things in the back of your mind. I mean, I don't make contracts at CodeStack, but this kind of knowledge helps me stay in sync with our clients. I always, like at the beginning, I mean, a lot of this doesn't apply because I'm not asking for money. I'm not going to do any of this. But what it does help me do, it helps me at the beginning when I'm first starting on a client's project to know exactly what their needs are. Right. And I'm going to write them down and I'll summarize them, send them to them. And, sometimes you think, but, there's something that you're missing or not understanding. So I get the client involved. Okay, let's agree on that. This is what it is. I thought it was this. Huh?
It's on Google Drive and it says I need access to it.
Really? Because on Google Drive, I set it to anyone with a link. But okay, so how about this? If anyone wants it in chat, post your email address and then I'll add you guys. Is that okay? That'll happen right after we get off here.
Okay.
Here's a question for you, Louie.
Yo.
How do you deal with what the client wants as a design and what you feel is most appropriate for the current trends and current, current adequate design to what's out right now?
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. So what I do, let me see, I'm just looking through something real quick. So I tell them in a nice way, right? Ultimately, it's their project. But I'll say, you know what, this isn't the best idea. That's if it's really a bad idea, but I'll show them my style and they'll say, oh, well, what about this? And for an example, and I'm trying to think of a way to say this. we had a client, or I had a client, I should say, that had the idea that it would be cool if their web page looked like an iPad, like if you were looking at an iPad, looking at their page. So if you can understand what I'm saying, the web page itself would have an iPad on it, and inside the iPad was their website, right? They thought this was really cool. And it is kind of a cool idea, to be honest with you, but the problem was, and what I told them, I said, well, what if someone is looking at the website on an iPad? Then they're looking at the website on an iPad And they were like, oh, okay. And that kind of, for these particular people, it kind of like made them think, you know, maybe we got to listen a little bit more. So yeah, the only thing you could do is give it your best shot. If they want something else, maybe discuss it with them. Well, you know, maybe we could do it something like that, but a little bit different, so it's more modern or looks better or has better accessibility. But ultimately, it's up to the client in terms of the looks. Thanks for the question, James. Yeah, you guys, I see all your emails in here, so let me copy and paste those real quick. Lots of them. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so I will give all of you guys access right after this. Any more questions about design? And you know what, if you don't mind, you can do this in chat. I'm just wondering, like, how many of you are going to be headed more to the design side as opposed to the pure development side? If anyone wants to comment on that. If you can hear my cat, he's yelling at me. Okay, so Liz, you might do it on the side. Someone sounds like a robot. Oh, that's me.
Yeah, that's you.
Doggone it. I'm a sideline. Yeah, that's cool. I do have a question for you.
Hey, Matt, you're a robot right now.
Oh, okay. I'll be right back. Never mind.
I had a question, but I forgot what it was. Here's a question, Louie. I don't know if you're very familiar with the current job market for designers, but how would you compare job hunting as a designer versus job hunting as a programmer?
Well, let's see if do I have a robot voice or do I have a normal voice?
No, you're good.
Okay. So from what I can see, because I've been helping a friend look for a job, there's more developer jobs, but there's still quite a bit of designer jobs, especially if you're a designer who could program even a little bit, which is more like front-end development, right? Those jobs are more plentiful than a straight web designer who would do UI and UX, although there's a lot of those jobs too. I kind of see all of them, although pure developers tend to make more money than someone who doesn't code. But UI and UX is very important. But the problem is, even at big companies, there tends to be lesser amount of UI UX designers. Oh man, go over there. Or then you know, usually there's a larger group of developers, but there's a lot of jobs. And it's not just jobs in, you know, designing the look. There's the UI and UX, like I talked about, and then the front-end developers who typically will know HTML, CSS very well, and a certain level of JavaScript. So there's jobs for both. And the more you can do, actually, the more valuable you become, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that.
Yeah, that's Jeremy. That's Joe asked if that's my cat, Jeremy. That's him. Joseph, where do you work, man? Joseph Rocca, if you don't mind me asking.
I currently work at Tokay Press in the downtown area.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know your boss, Diane.
Yes.
Yeah, how's she doing?
Good. She's She's doing really well.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. So do you program? What do you do for her there?
No, and so currently I just do mostly print work, some like social media graphics, but I have designed websites, but we have subbed that work out to like Upwork and just freelance.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, she used to sub it out a little bit out to me. It was a long time ago though, like 2010 or something like that. But if you guys don't know, Tokay Press is a real great design firm in Stockton. They do fantastic work.
I think.
Yeah. So guys, I think if no one else has any questions, I think that would be it for me, but feel free to ask.
I do have one regarding your contract. How many times do you allow a client to come back and ask for changes before it's final? Do you like have to specify a number, if that makes sense?
You know, it's really up to you and the client. It kind of depends on the complexity of the project. You know, if it's something like, if it's just like text changes, but believe me, when I say just text changes, you have to put a limit on that stuff. But there could be more changes allowed. And then if you want to bend the rules, like if they've used, like, let's say you had 10 changes and they use, 10 changes, but they're like, oh, you know what, this little thing, and it's a little thing, you know, obviously let them do it. But you can't have people extending the deadline and stuff like that, because what if you have other work lined up, you know? And a lot of times, the other thing is you got to look out for things like people being unprepared, right? Like not giving you the copy or expecting you to write the copy. No, unless that's in the contract, you write the copy, you don't write the copy. You know, half the time they're going to change it anyways. So I like to say, you know, this is what you need to do. You need to write this copy and it needs to get to me by a certain time, and you should proofread the copy. I don't say it with this kind of voice I'm using now, which kind of sounds like I'm angry about it, but you need to proofread, double check it, go over it, make sure it's ready to go. And even in that case, they're going to change some things. So, but usually I allow that kind of thing if they've done their work. But in terms of overall changes, you got to pick a set amount based on the project. But changing course, changing direction, they have a whole new idea in the middle. No, that's when that contract gets stopped. Pay me the money, and then we create a new one. And there's a great video. It doesn't really swear, but look this up. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
This video here on YouTube by Mike Monteiro, who is runs a firm in San Francisco called Mule Design. But this is the name of it. Can you see that? It's very valuable to watch. This is Mike. This is his lawyer. They both go over it. A bunch of designers asking questions. And this is like often mentioned during this video, because he's going over the stuff the clients try to pull on you. And I say pull, not clients aren't always out to get you or trick you, but I should say the problems that you run into. So it's a good video to watch. And let me post this link in the chat. Where are you, chat? Okay. There's that one. Oh, I sent that to Blanks B by accident instead of everyone. I'm sorry, Blanks. I don't even know who you are. Acting like we're friends or something. Okay, to everyone there. Hopefully I didn't do that before. I did. I sent her or him. I'm sorry about that. I sent them another message. I must have like fat fingered something and put them in there. Anyways. Yep.
Cool. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, I think we're going to wrap it up here.
I'm good.
All right. Okay, so thanks for tuning in with us. We have another meetup in 2 Thursdays from now. I believe that's the 9th. Yes, the 9th of July. We don't have a topic on it yet, but look around on Meetup. It should be coming up pretty quick. Topic should be posted. This recording, like I said, will be on our YouTube channel along with the files that I've done. They will be on our GitHub very shortly. So thanks for tuning in, and hope you guys all have a great rest of the week.